Hello, everyone, and welcome to our safety series webinar on collection safety. We're excited to have you here with us today to kick off Waste Advantage's 2026 safety events. We have a record-breaking number of registrations for this session with more than 700 signed up. That's fantastic. We appreciate all of you who are participating today to hear great discussions on a review of recently issued federal safety data for solid waste collection, the awareness gap, why collection fleets still struggle with what drivers can't see, ensuring safe and compliant handling, transportation, or storage of hazardous materials, rear load safety and best practices, and enhancing solid waste safety with thermal imaging technology. Our goal is to not only bring people together to discuss these safety concerns and move in the right direction, but also to drive meaningful awareness and action around the risks that too often go unnoticed. Thank you to all of today's speakers, David, Davis, Brandon, John, and Adam. To read their full bios, please visit the link below. Thank you to today's sponsors as well, our platinum sponsors, Third Eye and Seek Thermal, and our silver sponsors, Route Smart, Swana, and Waste and Recycling Workers Week. More information on each of them can also be found at our website at the link noted. Let's get started. First up is David Biderman, president of Biderman's Consulting LLC and a longtime safety leader in the waste industry. David helps companies and local governments to address safety and sustainability issues, supports their advocacy objectives, and assists technology solution providers to grow their market share within the industry. He has testified before numerous federal, state, and local agencies and councils and has spoken about waste and recycling issues, policies, and trends at numerous U.S. and international conferences. David, take it away.
Thank you. Thank you, Angelina. Hopefully everyone can see my screen. Um, and I only was given a short period of time to speak, and so I'm going to speak relatively quickly. I apologize in advance for that. Um, Many of you know me. I was the former safety director at NWRA, executive director at SWANA, and it's really important for organizations like Waste Advantage to put together these very meaningful free events for people in the public and private sector in both the United States and Canada. I'm going to briefly talk about four topics. I'm going to review the recent U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics fatality data. I'm going to review the recently issued injury and illness data that agency issued. Third, I'm going to look at the Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration's crash data, which is now several years old, but gives us some insights as to collisions with third parties. And then finally, although it's not fire data, although it's not federal data, I think we can't have a discussion in the solid waste industry these days around safety without at least briefly mentioning fire data, because fires are obviously happening everywhere, and there is a really good resource for that information. So let's get to it. The first topic is fatalities. This is sort of the big headline that people in the industry look at very frequently. And for those of you who aren't aware, BLS, Bureau of Labor Statistics, recently released their 2024 data. So we're in 2026. BLS is always a year behind, and this year, because of the government shutdown, they were a little bit more than a year behind. But last month, they released their data, and you'll see there on the screen, we are now the fifth most dangerous job in the country in terms of rate of fatal work injuries. So that's waste collection. That's not the entire industry, that's waste collection. We were fourth the previous year, and we have ranged between fourth and ninth for the 20 years where I've been involved in safety in the solid waste industry. Something to note on this chart is if you look closely, the difference between being fourth and between being eighth is minuscule. The difference is very, very small, and it would only take a very small improvement in our performance to drop down to the ninth most dangerous job or the eighth most dangerous job in the country. And so I have a little bit of optimism that we're going to get there in the next year or two. You'll note that fishing is number two. That's why they had the TV show Most Dangerous Catch, and logging is the most dangerous job in the United States. So if you dig deeper into the collection, into the data, you'll see that of the fatalities they recorded, there were 36 for collection employees. There's a number of different ways that BLS counts collection employees, but the chart that I refer to had 36. Remember, these are employees. This is not contract workers. It's not temp workers. So it likely undercounts a little bit the actual number of people who have died who aren't strictly considered employees. The number of fatalities at MRFs, which we're not going to discuss today, was nine. That's a significant number compared to previous years. And there's zero landfill employee fatalities reported by BLS. This is not fatalities at landfills. This is fatalities to landfill employees. And I just want to make sure that we're clear on that. If a collection worker is dumping his load at a landfill and a truck turns over on him, he's counted in the collection category, not in the landfill category. So when we look at this data set, on the one hand, there's some good news. There's been a slight decline in the number of collection workers who were killed in 2024 compared to the previous year. Similarly, the fatality rate is down slightly, but I don't think that, being fifth is a reason to take a victory lap. If you work for a smaller company, 150 trucks or smaller, if you've got manual or rear load trucks, your organizations are the ones that are having a disproportionate number of these fatalities. People are falling off the riding step. They're being backed into when they're on the ground. They're being struck by another vehicle, or the truck's turning over and they're not wearing a seatbelt and they're getting killed. Those are the four principal ways that collection workers are being killed in the solid waste industry. The first fatal incident of this year is a sort of a case study. It happened at a medium-sized company down in Georgia. Gentleman was a helper. He was doing residential collection on a Saturday, which is unusual, and they were doing it because it was the week of the first of the New Year's, and presumably they had shifted all their collection by a day to give people off on January 1st. Unfortunately, this gentleman was run over by his own truck. This is obviously a totally preventable incident and is the type of thing that we need to eliminate if we can get the industry off of the list of the 10 most dangerous jobs in the United States. But currently, we're at the point where we have 50 workers more or less dying every year. That's about one a week. This is including employees and contract workers. And when I'm doing safety training for local governments and for waste companies, I remind them, the workers and the supervisors, that it's a dangerous job and that cutting corners, rushing, or just ignoring a safety rule for 5 seconds can have fatal consequences. If somebody's driving and looks down at their phone for just 5 seconds at 30 miles an hour in a truck, that can be very, very significant. We unfortunately, in another industry, saw a accident at LaGuardia Airport on Sunday night when a basic safety rule was ignored and an overworked air traffic controller was handling both an emergency situation and a plane landing at the same time. When I'm talking to folks about reducing accidents, injuries, and fatalities, I use this poster that I saw in Fairfax County, Virginia, about 10, 12 years ago. It was made by the children of the people who work there. It's a great reminder for your workers as to why they should work safely. Yes, they should work safely because the company demands it or the local government, the local agency requires it, and it's required by law. But at the end of the day, we want to make sure that these guys understand, and they're primarily guys, that these guys understand that they're the primary breadwinner and that they have wives and children and mothers and fathers, and they want to get home to their family safe every day. And from my perspective, the most valuable safety message is the message that's in this poster, which, by the way, costs $0. There's no cost to make this poster. It's literally, a piece of poster board and some crayons. Let me turn now to the injury data that came out. So this data came out in January. I presented on it at Suwana, Arizona Safety Summit in early February. Shout out to Dave Bennett at Scottsdale for putting that together. The BLS data for 2024 is not a good report for this industry. In the collection side of the industry, the frequency of reported injuries and illnesses went up in 2024 compared to 2023. So the frequency of these injuries, I'll call them incidents, because incidents is the sum of injuries and illnesses. Incidents increased from 4.4 to 5.0. That's a pretty significant increase of almost 15%. And what it means is that there were 9,000 reported injuries and illnesses in the solid waste industry in 2024. That's like 25 every day. That's a very significant number. I mentioned the MRFs earlier on the fatality slide. I want to highlight it here again. Notice the MRF injury rate or injury and illness rate went up very significantly in 2024 compared to 2022 because there was no 2023 data. And it's now higher than the collection rate, very significant. Um, and in the 24 data, we saw an increase in injuries while illnesses decreased. Some of that may be due to the fact that we had less people out because of COVID in 2024 compared to 2023. Third and final piece of data that I want to look at from the federal government is the FMCSA large truck and bus study. So they publish an annual report that looks at trucks and buses across a zillion different matrices. And if you really drill down across all of that stuff on page 69 of their most recent report, you can find the solid waste collection data. And in that report, they identified that there were 115 fatal crashes in 2022. That number is consistent with the data that I collected with Jesse Maxwell's help at SWANA when we used to go out to the industry and find out how many third-party crashes they had. We figured there were between 80 and 100 of them every year. And we need to keep in mind that these crashes aren't individual, don't necessarily mean individual fatals. They could be multiple fatalities. So they're both drivers and helpers, our own workers, but they also can involve and often involve pedestrians, other vehicles, bicyclists, motorcyclists, and even wheelchair users. There was a very high profile incident in New York City in December where a garbage truck started hitting some illegally double parked cars in Harlem and then crashed into a scaffolding at a street corner. And unfortunately, there was a 75-year-old woman under that scaffolding and she was killed. So these incidents continue to happen and we need to do whatever we can to avoid being involved in them. Last data point I want to mention is fire data. Big hat tip to Ryan Fogelman at Fire Rover. He and his company generate terrific data and freely report out on it to the industry. Here's the data set for the last 10 years. You can see that there's been an increase in the number of reported fires taking place on an annual basis. I can tell you that I'm aware of a particular facility that had more than 50 fires last year. One single disposal facility. So this certainly undercounts the numbers. And there's probably in most states in the United States these days, there's a fire somewhere in our industry, either in a truck or a disposal facility or recycling facility or at a landfill. And as I hinted at, we've had these fires taking place in the back of the truck in hot loads, often due to lithium-ion batteries. These events take place in the yard, and when they happen in the yard, if the trucks are packed closely next to each other, that can be catastrophic. And a growing number of fleets have had these situations where five, six, seven trucks are taken out of service because somebody forgot to clean out the truck at the end of the day or didn't do the battery disconnect switch. And of course, we're seeing these events at recycling facilities throughout the United States, and we need to do more to communicate to our customers, to waste haulers, about keeping lithium ion batteries and other dangerous items out of our waste streams. So I think I almost got it in on time. Please put your questions in the chat. And Angelina, I turn it back to you.
Thank you, David. That was great. You did come in right on time. Great overview of the trends and really important information to think about. Next up, we have Davis McDougal, Director of Product Management Digital at Environmental Solutions, a division of Terex, and he will discuss the awareness gap. Davis?
Awesome. Let me get my slide shared here. All right. Hopefully everyone's able to see my screen. So first off, I appreciate everyone joining today. As Angelina mentioned, my name is Davis McDougal. I lead product management for Third Eye, Softback, and other digital solutions, which are our technology brands within the environmental solutions segment at Terex. We build software, hardware, and AI systems specifically for waste and recycling fleets. That is our DNA and has been for over 2 decades. Before I get into the industry challenge I want to talk about, let me spend a minute giving you some context on who we are. Third Eye is a refuse technology company. We are not a generic fleet camera provider who bolted on to the waste vertical. We were built for this industry from day one. We are a part of the ESG and Terex family alongside Heil, Softpak, Marathon, Bain, and CrowdCam. What you see on the screen are 6 things that we do. 360-degree camera systems, up to 6 cameras per truck with real-time in-cab displays and footage uploaded to the cloud automatically. AI-powered safety and detection, object recognition trained on actual collection environments. Driver safety and coaching, we have a dedicated review team that monitors safety events from your fleet's camera footage and delivers coaching opportunities. That is live working today, and it is an area we're continuing to invest in. We also do positive service verification, which is photo and video proof of every pickup without the driver lifting a finger. On top of that, we add on overs for our residential and commercial customers, which annually inject about $3 billion in new revenue for our industry. Then contamination detection, both en route and in the facility. AI identification of the recycling contamination right at the collection point, which is then tied to a parcel. And predictive fleet maintenance through our optimized module, which monitors engine and body fault codes that can help auto-generate work orders before something breaks down en route. All that connects through connected collections, our integration layer with Heil Body's Softpak back office and your existing fleet management systems. One ecosystem, not another silo. Now here's why I'm sharing this up front. Everything I'm about to walk you through, the operational reality, the cost picture, the gap, is exactly what drove us to build this platform. So as you listen, you'll naturally start to see where these solutions fit, and that's by design. A driver pulls out of the yard at 5 a.m. He thinks he's checked his mirrors, and he thinks that he is clear. But somewhere between the hopper and the rear axle, there's a blind spot that nobody is monitoring. That's the awareness gap. And that scene plays out hundreds of times a day across every fleet represented on this call. It's happening right now on a route somewhere in your territory while we are sitting here on this webinar. So let me put some specifics to what I just described. Refuse collection is not like driving a semi-truck on a highway. The operating environment is fundamentally different, and the visibility challenge are more severe than almost any other commercial vehicle application. Your drivers are making 800 to 1,200 stops per shift. Think about that number. Every one of those stops is a moment where the awareness gap is open, a moment where a pedestrian can step into a blind zone, where a cyclist is approaching curbside, where a kid is chasing a ball into the street. There are 6 or more significant blind zones on a typical collection truck. The rear, both sides, the front of the cab, around the hopper, and the area where the automated arm works during operation on an ASL. The mirrors help, but they cover a fraction of that footprint, and no mirror in the world covers what's directly behind you during a backing event. And this is the point I really want to drive home. The risk is not just in front of the truck, it is all the way around it. Most of the industry's attention has gone toward forward-facing cameras and dash cams, and those matter. But the blind zones that cause the worst outcomes in collection are on the sides, at the rear, and around the body of the truck. If your visibility solution only looks forward, you're covering maybe 20% of the risk. The other 80%, that's everywhere else. We're talking about 30,000 plus pounds threading residential streets that were designed for sedans. Streets parked with cars narrowing the lane to a single vehicle width. Joggers with earbuds in cannot hear you. Delivery vans double parked around corners, school bus stops, dog walkers, all of it every single day. And here's something that I think gets overlooked in safety conversations. Slow does not always mean safe. Slow means prolonged exposure. Every second a driver is creeping down that street is another second something unexpected can step into a zone they physically cannot see. The driver at stop 187 is not the same driver they were at stop 1. That's not a performance issue, and I want to be really clear about that. That's biology. Attention narrows over a shift. Reaction time slows. The awareness gap does not stay constant. It gets wider as the day goes on. And that's true for your best drivers, not just your newest ones. And the data confirms all of this. NHTSA tells us that in a third of all large truck crashes, the driver never saw the other vehicle. It was in a blind spot. A quarter of all waste industry accidents involve backing. And here's the one that should give us all pause. Injury rates went up last year to 5 per 100 workers, despite everything the industry has invested in training, equipment, and safety programs. Everything I just described has a price tag, and it shows up in the places you might not immediately connect to a blind spot on the truck. $91,000. That's the average cost of a commercial vehicle accident. And that's the average. FMCSA puts injury-involved accidents closer to $400,000. And we're seeing nuclear verdicts in trucking, jury awards north of $10 million, becoming more common, not less. One bad incident can reshape the economics of your entire operation for years. $5,000 to $12,000 to replace a single CDL driver. And that's if you can find one. We're still roughly 60,000 CDL drivers short nationally. So when a driver tells their supervisor they don't feel safe, and the answer is check your mirrors, that driver is already looking at job postings. That's not just a safety loss. That's a recruiting, training, and operational loss that takes months to recover from. But here's the flip side of that. When drivers know their company has invested in technology that actually has their back, when there's a system watching the zones they cannot see, giving them alerts before something develops, that changes the conversation. We hear this from fleet partners constantly. Drivers who feel protected stay longer. That's a retention advantage that you cannot get from a signing bonus. And despite everything the industry has collectively invested in safety over the last decade, training programs, new mirrors, policy changes, truck crash fatalities are up 40%. 40%. That means something structural is not working. Now here's where this hits each of you differently, depending on where you sit in the operation. If you handle insurance renewals, carriers are asking new questions. Not just, do you have cameras, but are they integrated into coaching, into fleet operations? They're differentiating between passive recording and active awareness platforms. That's a real shift. If you haven't talked to your broker about what underwriters are looking for in 2026, it's worth a conversation. Maintenance teams. Every collision takes a truck off the road for 2 to 4 weeks of body work. That's a rental in its place, a cascade of route reassignments, and work orders competing with everything else your shop is already managing. And for the ops and safety leaders, workers' comp claims for visibility-related incidents don't just cost money in the moment. They compound. They affect your experience modification rate. They affect your ability to bid municipal contracts. And OSHA recordables create the kind of regulatory scrutiny that nobody in this room wants. I want to address something I hear in almost every conversation about fleet visibility. We already have cameras. And you might. A lot of fleets do. But here's the distinction that I think matters more than any other point I'll make today. Cameras record. They do not warn. If your cameras capture footage that gets reviewed after an incident, after someone got hurt, after the truck got damaged, after the claim got filed, that camera documented the awareness gap. It did not close it. Passive visibility is not the same as active awareness. A camera that a driver can act on in real time doesn't change what happens in that blind zone. It just gives you better footage of what went wrong. And this is where most fleets sit today. Cameras installed but reviewed only after something happens. No real-time alerts reaching the driver. Systems that don't talk to routing or telematics. Maintenance teams already stretched thin, now asked to troubleshoot add-on technology that was not designed for their trucks. And drivers carrying the full cognitive load of operating the vehicle with no technological backup. That's not because anyone made a bad decision. It's because the technology available to this industry hadn't caught up to the problem until recently. So what does closing the loop actually require? It requires AI detection that warns the driver before a collision path develops, not after. And that detection needs to be trained on actual collection scenarios. It needs to know what a residential street at 6 a.m. looks like, what a pedestrian stepping off a curb looks like, what a narrow alley with a dumpster on both sides looks like. Highway driving AI it just does not translate. It requires 360-degree coverage designed specifically around the blind zones that collection trucks create, not a generic dash cam bolted to a windshield. I want to say that again because I think it's the most important architectural decision in this entire space. The coverage has to go all the way around the vehicle, sides, rear, front, around the body. A forward-facing camera is useful for road incidents and exoneration, but the collection-specific risk, the pedestrian on the curbside, the car in the rear blind zone during a reverse, the worker near the hopper, those are all around the truck, not in front of it. It requires integration. The system has to talk to your routing, your telematics, your back office. Standalone cameras are what I would call a level 2 solution. Integration is what gets you to level 4. It requires predictive maintenance that catches mechanical issues before they strand a truck on route. And it requires driver coaching tied to real events, not annual training videos that everyone sits through and forgets. The research is very clear on this point. The National Surface Transportation Safety Center found that cameras plus coaching cut events by 52%, not cameras alone. It's a closed loop. Capture the event, review it, coach from it, and repeat. We have a dedicated team doing this coaching review work today for our fleet partners, and it's an area we're actively expanding with AI-powered capabilities because the data makes it so clear that the coaching loop is where the driver behavior actually changes. Before I show you the financial return on all of this, I want to take a moment and be clear about what we're actually talking about, and David just touched on this. 36 workers in refuse and recycling collection didn't come home last year. The first return on closing this gap is not on a spreadsheet. It's a driver who makes it through the shift safely. It's a pedestrian who does not get hit. It's a family that stays whole. Everything I'm about to show you on the slide, the percentages, the premium reduction, the ROI numbers, only matter because that matters first. Now, for those of you who need to build the business case, everything on this slide is independently sourced. These are not our numbers. 50% reduction in accidents rates with integrated camera systems. That comes from Woodward Sawyer, an independent insurance advisory firm, not a camera vendor. And the key word is integrated, not just installed. Integrated into operations, connected to coaching, feeding data back into the fleet. 10 to 30% insurance premium reductions for fleets running approved video monitoring systems. And approved is doing a lot of work in that sentence. Insurers are increasingly distinguishing between a camera that records and a platform that prevents. 52% fewer safety events when cameras are combined with driver coaching. That's from the NST-SCP. The camera alone does not change behavior at that scale. The coaching loop does. In Bennett Trucking, a fleet of 1,200 trucks added integrated monitoring and saw 30% fewer claims in 24 months. Their VP of Safety told a reporter he wouldn't oppose federal regulation requiring this technology because they're already doing it. When a fleet that size says it out loud, tells you where the industry is going. We're seeing a similar trajectory with the fleets we work with. When you wrap a truck at 360 degrees of awareness, not just a forward-facing camera, but coverage around the entire vehicle, and you connect that to coaching and fleet ops, the safety outcomes follow. That's not a theory. That's what we're seeing in the field every day. If you want to see what this kind of ROI model looks like applied to your specific operation, your truck count, your incident history, your insurance picture, I'm happy to have that conversation after this session. No pitch, just data. And let me close with this. We started with a simple observation. The cab of a refuse truck was not designed for 360-degree visibility. The blind spots are real. Training helps, mirrors help, but they cannot close the gap alone. The data tells us what that gap cost in dollars, in downtime, in industries, and the 36 lives this industry lost last year. And the data also tells us the gap is closable. Fleets that move from passive cameras to integrated awareness platforms are cutting their accident rates in half and fundamentally changing their insurance trajectory. This is the problem we built our entire company around. Third Eye exists because we believe refuse and recycling fleets deserve technology that was designed from the ground up for their operating environment, not adapted from another industry. I want to leave you with two questions to take back to your operation. First, Where does your fleet sit today on the spectrum from passive recording to active integrated awareness? And second, what would it mean for your operation, for your drivers, your maintenance budget, your insurance renewal, your ability to bid contracts if you could reduce visibility related incidents by 30 or 40%? I work on this problem every day. It's what I do at Third Eye. If you'd like to continue this conversation, whether it's about the data, the technology, or what a deployment can look like for your fleet, or just swapping notes, my contact information is here on the screen, and I generally welcome the outreach. Not a sales call, a conversation between people who care about the same platform. So with that said, I appreciate everyone's time, and Angelina, I'll turn it back to you.
Thank you, Davis. That was a great presentation, great information for everybody. A couple of notes to all of our attendees. If anybody has any questions, feel free to put them in the chat. Our presenters are happy to answer questions throughout, and then we'll also have a discussion at the end with some questions as well. So next up we have Brandon Black, who is editor Environmental Health and Safety at J.J. Keller. He will be talking about safe and compliant handling of hazardous materials. That includes transportation and storage. Brandon?
All right, thanks, Angela. I'm going to share my screen. All right, so hopefully y'all can see this, but so thanks for having me. My name's Brandon. I've been with JJ Keller for about a year now, but today I want to talk about basically I come from the generator side of things, so I have a unique perspective. I could hear somebody in the background.
Sorry.
But I come from the generator side of things, but because the EPA's cradle to grave policy, I was always worried about, after it left my facility, because cradle to grave, still responsible for it. But, and that's when you leave it in the hands of the transporter or the hazardous waste transporters. But with that said, transporters of hazardous waste is regulated by the EPA and established by RCRA, as well as hazardous materials transportation rules. They're enforced by the US DOT. And why this matters is because from a hauler's perspective, the condition of waste at pickup, it really determines whether a shipment can move safely and legally. Unlike many other types of freight, hazardous materials, they carry significant risk if they are improperly packaged, labeled, or stored. And like other kinds of freight, hazardous materials, they do carry significant risk if they are improperly packaged, labeled, or stored, like I said. But when a hauler arrives at a facility, they really rely on the generator to have a couple things. That's correctly identified the waste, packaged appropriately, labeled, and marked the containers correctly, and ensure basically that they're safe to transport. And these elements, and if any of these are incorrect for any reason, you can face multiple risks or fines. This can be transportation safety risk. Hazardous waste trucks, they often carry multiple incompatible materials on the same vehicle. Examples can include, things like flammable liquids, corrosives, oxidizers, toxic waste. If a container is improperly sealed or compromised, a release could occur during transit and could cause chemical reactions, fires, vapor releases, or any kind of other environmental contamination. And these are particularly dangerous because they occur in uncontrolled environments like highways or populated areas. And then driver safety. Drivers, they do rely on the accuracy of waste information that's provided by the generator. If it is misidentified somehow, the driver may not know proper PPE or the proper spill response or segregation requirements for incompatible waste, things like that. And then you have one of the most important principles, and that's, the concept of the cradle to grave responsibility, like I mentioned earlier. Under RCRA, or the Resource Conservation and Recovery Act, hazardous waste generators remain responsible for their waste even after it leaves their facility. But that doesn't mean that haulers aren't exempt from responsibility per se. Transporters, they must comply with the 40 CFR, which is the Department of Transportation. And violations can occur if they do transport improperly prepared hazardous materials or waste. So when a generator provides a shipment that's incorrectly labeled or packaged, for instance, or it's leaking, both the generator and the transporter can face enforcement actions. And then common problems they usually encounter, haulers saying, is improper container condition. Containers must be in good condition and compatible with the waste that they're hauling. Common issues are we have rusted drums that have been sitting outside, bulging containers, improperly closing lids that can come loose, or containers that are just not closed at all. And then under 40 CFR 262:17, hazardous waste containers must be maintained in good condition. And then from a transporter's perspective, leaking containers are one of the biggest risks during loading. And then incorrect labeling or marking. Haulers I talk to frequently encounter containers that are missing hazardous waste labels, DOT hazard labels, proper shipping names, and even the accumulation dates. And these missing labels, they create all kinds of confusion because you as the driver, they're dependent on these things to determine, your vehicle placarding, segregation requirements, and your environmental response procedures. And then problem 3 is unknown or misidentified waste. One of the most difficult scenarios for a transporter is unknown waste. And sometimes generators, they're going to label their containers simply as waste solvent, or personal favorite that I've seen before, they just label it chemicals. And that type of labeling provides nothing in regard to information for safe transport, but the drivers, they must rely on that shipping description on the manifest to determine the hazard classification. If that information is wrong, for instance, the entire shipment could be improperly classified under the DOT regulations. And then problem 4 is when incompatible waste they're stored together, this can be, for example, acids that are stored next to cyanide waste, or oxidizers that are stored near flammable liquids, or even reactive materials near water sources. And then while segregation rules apply to storage at a facility, they also affect how the material must be loaded onto the truck. And improper storage can make safe loading more difficult, and it can increase the risk of specific chemical reactions. Then got some transportation hazards. Transportation adds a number of additional risks that don't really exist during any kind of stationary stage. When a hazardous waste is transported, containers, they can vibrate. They're subject to extreme temperature changes in some instances, or they could just cause an experience physical movement or impact. And then a container that appears stable in the warehouse may fail under transportation conditions, and that's why DOT packaging standards are so strict. And then containers must meet specifications under the hazardous material regulations for performance testing, pressure resistant, drop testing, compatibility. And then from a hauler's perspective, I would take a guess and say properly packaged shipment is the most important safety factor during your transport, along with many other things, of course. All right. And then regulatory consequences, like I stated earlier, both the generator and the transporter, they may face enforcement actions. And I came across an article one of my co-workers read at J.J. Keller, and it had the top 5 violations. So they found that improper hazardous waste packaging, incorrect shipping descriptions, transportation of leaking containers, and missing placards and manifest discrepancies. And these penalties can be thousands of dollars per violation. So we aren't just talking about, a slap on the wrist in most cases. And then we'll talk about effective communication between the hauler and the generator. And one of the most effective safety tools across really any industry, no matter if it's general industry, waste hauling, transportation, it's going to be communication, right? And a short conversation before a shipment occurs can prevent major issues. You can be informed on unusual waste scenarios the generator may have, or discuss packaging requirements, confirm DOT descriptions, and review any kind of special handling requirements. And then to summarize, safe and compliant hazardous material handling is critical not just for inside the facility, but it's also for you know the entire transportation process. And then from a hauler's perspective, again, proper preparation by the generator protects you, of course, and prevents incidents and ensures you stay compliant and reduce liabilities for all the parties that are involved when hazardous materials are properly identified, packaged, labeled, stored, and things like that. And then the transportation process does become significantly safer and more efficient if you use a hauler transporter you know, and they have the power to make this happen, even if you have to refuse the shipment or the transportation. I've seen that happen multiple times with the good transporters. And then ultimately, hazardous waste management is a shared responsibility between generators, transporters, and in the treatment facilities. And then, by working together and following these requirements, established under RCRA and hazardous materials regulations, organizations can protect employees, the public, of course, and the environment. And that's it. Thank you for having me. Back to Angela.
Thank you so much, Brandon, for sharing that great information. Next up, we have John Andel, Corporate Health and Safety Compliance Director for Elect Waste Services, talking about rear load safety and best practices. John?
Good afternoon, everyone. First, I wanted to circle back to the BLS data that David talked about. One of the big factors in that, and most of our incidents that affect that number occur in rear load. So simple, okay, let's eliminate rear loaders. Yeah, we've been trying to do that in the industry for a lot of years. Let's put in automated side loaders and Corrado trucks wherever we can. It's definitely, of course, sometimes you get some municipalities that are resistant to that, or sometimes adding carts to a municipal bid could be a difference between winning or not winning that bid. So it makes a big difference. And then you get areas like we deal with where I work out of, areas of Philadelphia, older cities where you just simply can't get another type of truck in the city, front load and whatnot. You've got alleyways, you're pushing containers to the trucks that are parked on the main roads, and it can be challenging. Um, I want to talk about an incident that we had last year on a commercial rear load route. This happened in July at my company. We had a driver helper team, and they were in a city environment. They were pushing a rear load container out of an alleyway about 5 feet wide. The loader was on the front of the container, driver was on the back. The loader started to spin the front of the container as it cleared the alleyway, and the driver had his hand on the trunnion bar as the loader spun the container. It crushed his pinky against the brick wall. Now, he did have gloves on. Let me share my screen real quick here. Bear with me a second. There we go. So typically in rear load, most of us use these type of gloves. They're class 4 cut resistant. They're very effective. Um, I thought a lot about this accident, and a lot of it came down to hand placement, where our drivers put our hands. And it's something we train on all the time. And we try to make sure that we train at new hire training, that we follow up with at least a yearly training with all our employees. Yet it still occurs. And there's a certain repetitive nature to the business. And, you're doing 80, 100 containers a day. Human nature, at some point, you're going to put your hand in the wrong place. So I tried to think, what can we do different with this? So what we came up with is we switched the glove we use. We switched to these. These are class 6 cut resistant, but they also have impact zones. So it has crush resistance on the zone. on the fingers and can protect it. So we felt that that was a big factor we could use to reduce finger injuries. So it was something we wanted to look at. And fortunately, we haven't had any type of major hand or finger injury since we started using these last July. And other than guys complaining they're a little hot in the summertime, they seem to have been well received. And so we're about 9 months into it, so we'll see where this one goes. I wanted to get into some of the other types of injuries we get in rear load. A big one, loaders falling off the steps of the truck while the truck's in forward motion. Now, best practices, we shouldn't be going over 10 miles an hour when we have a helper on the back of the truck. I think if we do that, we're not going to have any serious but fatal injuries. We may have some injuries. Um, Last week I was on an NWRA meeting, and Jeff Martin from Casella brought up that his company is now testing using bicycle helmets with their helpers to avoid fatal injuries from guys falling off the back of the trucks to reduce the head injuries. So that's something to look at. Uh, Another big injury we get in rear load, the loader's falling off the riding step while the truck's backing up. Again, that's not a best practice. If the truck's backing up, no one should be on the riding steps, because if they fall off, it doesn't usually end too well. Very important that we train proper backing procedures, that we tell our laborers never to be directly behind the truck. They should be to the side. They need to be aware of the driver's blind spots. And I always tell my crew that you should be able to see the driver's eyes in the mirror. And if you can't, you're in a blind spot where they can't see you. And your drivers should be trained, if they can't see the helper, they should be stopping the truck immediately until they find out where the helper is. Um, Getting struck by a vehicle en route, that's a big one. It's tough out there. I think 35 states now have slow down to get around laws, but people seem to be in a big hurry, and the trash truck, when it's on route, just seems to be a hindrance to where they want to go. So the public's not looking at your safety out there. Make sure you work from the right side of the truck. Make sure you're wearing high visibility gear. Avoid the left side of the truck. You want to put the truck between you and the traffic, and the right side working air kind of creates a buffer for you. Better they hit the truck than they hit the employee. Another thing we got to look at is when we do our pre-trips on our trucks. We maybe do a pretty good job of checking fluids and tires and turn signals and lights, but we got to remember to check the rear load equipment. We don't want to send people out on a bent riding step or a bent grab handle. It's kind of setting our people up to fail. We want to make sure those things are working correctly. Check our cables. If the cable's going to fray, we don't want to have that truck in service. There's a lot of incidents that occur with that when the cable breaks, or if the container is not locked down and the cam locks, it can jump out of the container. And those things can get pretty ugly. Resources. So I've worked for some of the bigger companies in this industry, and I work for some smaller companies. And I do see that the smaller companies don't necessarily have the training resources or the safety resources that the bigger companies do. Or sometimes you get the smaller companies and you've got multiple people or one person wearing multiple hats. They may be the supervisor, but they're also responsible for safety and claims. So it kind of spreads things out. Some good resources that we have out there available to us. This is the ANSI standards for mobile waste and recycled material collection, the ANSI Z240 or 245.1 standards. NWRA is the gatekeeper of this. They have standards meetings several times a year, and these are the best practices for the industry, which would include not being on a riding step backing up, not going over 10 miles an hour when someone's on the back of the truck. Additionally, SWANA has a safety tips and tricks booklet out there. This is very good. A lot of very good best practices in the industry. If you want to build a safety program, this is a good place to start. It covers everything from slips, trips, and falls to defensive driving. Those are good resources for you. Lastly, in closing, here's my contact information if anyone would like to reach out to me. I think one of the things we need to look at in the industry is fatigue, and we don't talk about that enough. We have the 60 hours of service rule, and I think that's probably a good rule when it comes to over-the-road trucking. But I think what we forget here in the waste industry is our drivers aren't driving trucks over the road all day. They're doing a lot of hard physical labor along with driving the trucks. one of the things we started doing at LEC is we tried to cut down our hours. We don't send drivers out on 12-hour routes. We send them out on 10-hour routes. We try to keep our drivers around 54, 55 hours. I think balancing those hours out a little bit can cut the fatigue factor. And when we're fatigued and we're behind the wheel and we're doing 800, 1,000 stops a day, we're not always going to make the best decisions. And we're also more injury prone. Maybe we didn't see that pothole and we have a slip, trip, and fall and whatnot. So those are definitely some things to look at. We were able to drop our TRIR score by almost 5 points over a 5-year period just by making that simple change. So, all right, that's everything I have. Thank you.
John, thank you so much for sharing that information, your real world knowledge, and the examples that you gave. Next up is Adam Kurtz, Solid Waste Superintendent, Public Works for the City of Goodyear, Arizona, talking about enhancing solid waste safety with thermal imaging technology. Adam?
Thank you, Angelina. I'll try to share my screen here. Um, and hopefully I'm sharing the right screen.
Yep,
Uh,
you have the main one on the left side and the coming up on the right side.
got you. Okay. Sorry about that. Uh,
Well, Adam is getting ready to present his slides. Just a reminder that if you have any questions throughout the presentations, to feel free to put them in the chat. We'll address a lot of them at the end. Any comments as well is perfectly fine.
Hey, Adam, if you could, at the top where it says display settings,
I'm
you want to hit
sorry.
at the top where it says display settings and start a
Yeah,
PowerPoint,
thanks.
and you want to hit swap display. That way we can see the correct screen.
Swap displays. Thank you.
Give it a second. So go back to full screen.
I apologize.
No, no problem. So go back to no, not that. At the bottom, at the top, yeah, this is present for presentation. Right there. Up, go up. Let me
Oh,
yep, right there.
yep,
And then yep, right there. Swap presenter view and slides. There you go. Good to go.
yep.
Thanks
Sorry
for
about that. All right, so my name is Adam Kurtz, Solid Waste Superintendent for the City of Goodyear. Thanks everybody for bearing with me on this. Well, let's just go ahead and get started. So I'd just like to kind of lay out where we're at, actually, in terms of location. So where is Goodyear? So we're a suburb or outside of the greater Phoenix area. We are one of the ninth fastest growing cities in the United States currently, and we we are dealing with a lot of issues that impact the industry as we continue to grow, and we're trying to identify ways to handle those situations. More importantly, what we're dealing with is as far as lithium batteries. A little bit what I'm going to talk about during this presentation is a problem, lithium dangers, situation, truck fires. I think this has been the hot topic with a lot of people recently, and it doesn't seem to be going away anytime soon. Our task was how do we improve early detection of the fires to protect staff and equipment. Our actions, what we did, we brainstormed and we partnered with industry experts to prototype some ideas that we had to try to identify the issue. And the result was we managed to outfit our whole entire fleet with an innovative thermal imaging system. So what's the problem? So we know that lithium batteries are pretty much everywhere. They're from in your phones, laptops. What we've seen recently is a lot more vape pens and vacuum cleaners, rechargeable vacuum cleaners, electric toothbrushes. I mean, they're everywhere. A lot of people don't understand what to do with them once they stop working or when they want to get rid of them, and they essentially pose a unique risk because of some, the different sizes and everything, and also the fact that they can overheat easily once they're ruptured. Um, so what we're seeing again is fires are being caused by hazardous materials in the waste stream, and what they do is they threaten our workers and public safety. And it's not a hypothetical problem. This is actually going on. It's threatened public safety. It's caused damage. We see this every day at MRFs and landfills. There's constant issues going on with fires generated by lithium batteries. Some of our sister cities, Phoenix, larger cities, Gilbert, they've been dealing with fires on a regular basis as well. I know Phoenix had 12 truck fires last year. Gilbert had multiple incidents as well. And Mesa reported truck fires as well. These are all larger cities in the municipal area. It's not just a risk to the financial stability of a program, but it's also a risk to public safety and those that have to fight these fires as well. Again, costly damages, delays, and operational disruptions. We all know that these trucks are not cheap. Also, once they go down for months on a time, which impacts operations. In our case, once we're out of a truck, it impacts our staff. It puts more burdens on other crew members to kind of pick up the slack and try to make up the difference for that. So, so we know they're increasing. So what is our method of detecting fires in our trucks right now? Well, we're relying on our drivers. We constantly tell our drivers every morning that, hey, what are you going to do if there's a situation? We've been training them on that for a while. But really at the moment, at that time, they only had the sight and smell. That those were the only tools that had at the time. And sometimes in some cases the fires were detected too late for the driver to get it to a safe location to eject the load. And by then, a lot of times the hydraulics or other materials on the truck were already impacted by that, and the truck couldn't open, or we couldn't get the material out in time. And again, public and driver safety is at serious risk. All these photos are from truck fires that we've had in the last few years. In fact, we had 6 fires in 1 year, and fortunately, no one was hurt in any of those. But we had 2 vehicles that were a total. One was almost a total loss, and then the other one was down for significant repairs. So we decided, hey, what are we going to do? We need to address this. We need to give our drivers a tool that they can use to help better react to the situation. And what we landed on was thermal imaging. So this is our brainstorm moment. This is a whiteboard that we use. We're trying to figure out, okay, how do we adapt thermal imaging to a garbage truck, essentially? And these are rear loaders that I'm talking about for those in the industry. What we could do is adapt the thermal imaging technology to look into the truck to look for heat sources within the truck. We worked with our fire department. They mentioned that they use thermal cameras, handhelds, the reveal type of handheld that they use to look through smoke and house fires and other things, so they can find where the heat sources are at, be able to better see. They said, hey, if there's a great way, then maybe there's a way that you can adapt that technology to garbage trucks. So we partnered with Seek Thermal, who previously were using cameras to detect heat sources in electrical walls and warehouses. They didn't exactly have anything that would fit a garbage truck, but they were willing to work with us on that. And this photo here is the first uh, beta, or I say alpha test that we did. We took one of their cameras that they had, we modified it to fit on the truck, and we included the display, so we had a visual of the camera and it working on there. So again, these are the cameras, the wires, everything. In one photo, we have the duct tape holding everything together. But what we found, and there's the duct tape I was talking about. What we found is that the camera was working just fine. So we started doing some small tests. We tested the theory. We were able to validate it, but we wanted to see it on a larger scale. So our fire department actually worked with us. They had what's called a flashover chamber, which is similar to the back of a garbage truck. We were able to modify that with the cameras, and we were able to put the cameras on the top of the flashover chamber and actually do several tests with the equipment. And what we found that using that thermal camera, that bought us a full 2 minutes before there was any sign of fire, flame, or smoke or anything that was coming out of that container. And in the world of trying to react quickly, we want to give those tools to our drivers so they could react a lot quicker. And we found that the 2 minutes bought us time. Um, so we started this over a year ago. We're actually on a year and a half now. We've actually incorporated this technology into all of our vehicles. We're working on a next series of the equipment to include some additional sensors through Seek Thermal. We've been working with them on that. And just to give you an idea, those cameras are very robust. They can handle a beating. And in the photo here that we see, the cameras have been modified a little bit more to lay flat. Our fleet department, which I'll get into, these are what I'm focusing on here is cameras, the speaker, the monitor system is what we have. And again, the monitor system is unique to ours. It doesn't necessarily have to go with the equipment, but we asked for that to be included, so that way our drivers could actually see and pinpoint where the fire would be in the back of the truck. Our fleet department, we worked with them to create the shrouds over the cameras. We know that these trucks get banged up and low hanging stuff when they're driving through neighborhoods and stuff like that. And it's worked out real well for us. And this is just some photos of our fleet department putting everything together and outfitting. This is what the finished product looked like. They did a great job modifying that to get those cameras on there. And I did have a video, which I'm not sure. I'm already having problems sharing everything on here, so I'm going to skip through the video, but it's on YouTube. If you go to our City of Goodyear page, there is a video of some of the fires that we've dealt with and interviews with our drivers. I'd just like to talk about SWANA Safety Resources. SWANA has been doing a really great job of putting together information. I know, John, you mentioned that as well, but there's been a big focus on the lithium battery safety and management. They've been having several meetings on ways to get the word out about the dangers of lithium batteries and disposal. And it's been a great resource, and I've been a part of that through the process. And then as far as resources, you could reach out to me. This is my contact information. Jeff Messner over at Seek Thermal has been a big help with this whole project. We're very excited about that. I know our drivers appreciate the fact that we're investing in their safety. They see the value in this, and it's been a great journey. So with that, that's all I have. I appreciate that.
Thank you, Adam. Great presentation. Thanks for talking about your success with the thermal imaging and Seek Thermal and how it affected your operations in a positive way. Now I'm going to now I'm going to ask all of our speakers to come back on camera, turn the microphones on. We'll go over some questions and some comments that people put into the chat, and then some other questions as well. All right. Thank you, everybody. Davis, can you unmute yourself? Let's see. First question is for him. So, David, in your opinion, why do you believe that there are more safety incidents at small to medium-sized haulers versus large companies?
Well, I think many of the smaller companies simply lack the same level of in-house safety expertise. They often don't have a safety director. They don't have the same budget for investing in safety. Smaller companies tend to be family owned, and the safety culture was handed down oftentimes from generation to generation. And perhaps the older generation didn't take safety as seriously as the younger generation does. I know that the majority of the safety training I'm doing is at these smaller companies, and they recognize that they are behind the times in terms of attention to safety. They see their workers' comp premiums going up, they see their insurance claims going up, they see that their data is moving in the wrong direction, and it requires a shift in attitude to be able to uh, get back to industry average, let alone getting beyond the industry average.
Right. Have you seen any improvement, say, within the last 5 to 10 years, as far as small and medium haulers versus the large companies?
So I would say it's a mixed bag. I think there are some small companies that do a superb job of putting safety front of mind and having residential routes that only are 600 stops as opposed to 1,000, or they invest in new equipment rather than running old rear load trucks for 12 years. But there are also smaller companies that don't do that and end up being involved in tragic incidents like the one I mentioned in Georgia that occurred in January. So, you know, this is an industry of 8,000 hauling companies, and there's no one size fits all answer to that question. I think there's a spectrum, but I think we need to improve on the small to medium size in the small to medium sized portion of the industry. And by the way, that also includes municipalities. Smaller sanitation departments share a similar profile than the private sector waste haulers,
Hmm.
and will have more than their fair share of collisions and incidents.
Hmm. Okay. John, what's the number one safety advice that you would give to drivers and or the other organizations?
Take the time, hire the right person, be choosy about who you hire, and take the time to train them well before you put them out on their own. I mean, I've seen companies where day two, they're handing the driver the clipboard in the truck, here you go. And don't do that. You're setting people up to fail. Invest your time in them, build them up to succeed.
How long, as far as driver training and safety training, obviously safety training is ongoing, but with regards to drivers, how long do you guys give for those initial hires?
It depends, 4 to 6 weeks usually, unless it's someone that's highly experienced in the industry, then maybe it's a little less. We don't put someone out on their own until our trainer, our supervisor, and myself are all in agreement, as well as the driver. I mean, if the driver has a factor in that, says, I'm not ready to go yet, we want to look into that why and listen to that and make sure that we're changing that before we put them out on their own.
Okay, great, great. So it's a collaborative process between the coaches
Yeah,
and the supervisors. Great.
yes.
Davis, there was a comment about working with in collaboration with unions when rolling out cameras. What are some tips for other organizations that are looking to do that? How to collaborate with the unions that may be in place?
Yeah, that's a million dollar question. I think a lot of times when drivers see cameras, the cameras are there to be, just kind of like in a way like the government or big overlord kind of watching everything that they do, monitor them, is going to fire them. That's not the purpose of this. And I think the important thing is when you're collaborating with municipality, whoever it is, it's the education to the drivers about why they're there. If the cameras were there to exonerate the drivers, they're there to help them keep their jobs and prove that hey, we're innocent, we're training, we're coaching. It's not holding them accountable for things. If you can get the drivers specifically to buy into the mentality that's there to exonerate them, you'll sell the operations teams. But unions in a lot of different municipalities are a barrier that it's not something you have to overcome. You just have to partner with them, show them why we're here to help you. And it turns out okay.
Is it important to involve them early on in the process?
Yeah, if you wait till the last stage to get with the union, it's going to be a challenge. You want their buy-in up front and quick rather than late to the game because then it feels like in a way you're going around them and they're supposed to be your partner in this.
Okay. Adam, what kind of significant decrease have you seen in the fire incidents since the system installation? Can you compare before and after? And somebody has asked, do you have any cameras on your transfer trailers as well?
Yeah, so as far as the decrease goes, so what we did was we actually incorporated a more robust inspection program along with the thermal imaging to kind of help our drivers identify the batteries before we actually pick them up. Um, we have not had any notable fires since we've installed the system. I kind of like to say Murphy's Law or whatever. It's like if we didn't have it, we'd have them, and if we once we put them on there, we haven't seen any, which has been great for us, right? But as far as the incidents, yeah, we haven't seen anything since that. So we're going on almost a year and a half now. And what was the other question? I apologize.
Do you have any cameras on your transfer trailers?
So as far as the transfer truck, you're talking about the rear loaders or transfer trucks. So we don't operate a transfer station or any of that material. But I do know that Seek Thermal has fixed cameras that they can use the same technology to alert of a heat source early on. And I know there's some other companies out there like Fire Rover that do that as well.
Okay, great, excellent. Brandon, how far in advance should haulers know what kind of hazardous materials they're transporting so in order to take the proper precautions?
In a perfect world, they're going to know, at least a week in advance. But that usually comes from the waste profiles, the pre-approved shipping information, and just good communication during that whole scheduling process. So ideally, before the truck even shows up, the hauler already understands what the material is and how it's classified and what kind of precautions they are needed. But in reality, sometimes it doesn't work out that way. And then sometimes I remember having drivers just show up unannounced, and I wasn't even ready to load this stuff. But and also and then it could be the other way. The generator isn't ready, or there could be last minute changes they want, and now they're forced to make some sort of decisions on the spot, which is not where you want to be with hazardous materials. And the biggest takeaway from generators, from a hauler's perspective, is if you had to boil it down to one thing, is building. I work with a company. I'm not going to say their name, but I built a really good um, relationship with their driver because he was always the one that came. And I know this isn't in a perfect world. Sometimes you get different drivers, but I had his number and I would call him and tell him what I've got, and he'd tell me a day, and so we were both prepared. And if you can build that relationship, even if it's with the salesperson or your contact within that company, and just have a relationship with them. But I think that's really important when you're dealing with those sort of things. So
Definitely, definitely. You kind of briefly touched on it in your presentation, but what kind of penalties or fines could an organization face if it commits any of the top five violations that you mentioned?
Yeah, so on the environmental side, you can face penalties of around, I've seen them go from $90,000 a violation, and that's per day. And the EPA is really strict about that. So if you got multiple issues, say you've got a leaking drum or a missing label or any kind of improper storage, you're not, looking at one violation, you're looking at several that are stacking on top of each other. And then on the transportation side, I've seen it pretty similar, um, about 90,000. And then some of them can jump over 200,000, if there was like a serious injury or facility or major damage involved. And then in extreme cases with a lot of different agents, OSHA, if it was a worker injury, they sometimes they'll prosecute the owners and stuff, but you get the same sort of things. You could get, on the very extreme cases, you could get in the criminal territory. So
Wow. Okay. John, you mentioned driver fatigue. Which is a great point. What are some of the best practices that organizations can take to manage that?
Try not to schedule 12-hour runs. Try to cut the time of your runs down, maybe 10 hours. Also, just having a presence on the street, having your supervisors out there checking up on people. You know what's normal for your employees and know what's not normal. And if it's a not normal situation, you got to be prepared to address that either off of them or maybe it's not the best day for that driver to be on the street. You've got to be aware of your people and know your people.
Yeah. Is there anything that you can do to make sure that they don't become complacent during due to repetitive tasks?
I think it circles back again to the presence on the street. Sometimes just a 5 minute stop to bring out some cold drinks and just talk to your guys is enough to reset and just get their head back into the game. And it's something you want to train on too. We train defensive driving. We know we want to recapture space around our vehicle when someone cuts in front of us, but we also got to know when we're mentally not there and take a minute to stop and pause and regroup before we move on. There's just literally thousands of decisions we have to make every day as a driver, and there's not a large margin for error on this.
Exactly. Davis, you mentioned the fatigue factor as well. The driver at stop 187 versus stop one. Is there anything that the technology can do to address that, or is it just a scheduling problem?
Yeah. Uh, I mean, yeah, that's one that I think about a lot. And I think John just kind of alluded to the problem is you can't schedule your way out of biology, right? Like over the course of the day, you're going to get tired. Like there's no way around that. So even with an optimized route and a reasonable shift length, which we talked about, the driver's attention is going to naturally degrade over the course of the day. Now, what technology can do is reduce that cognitive load. So I guess maybe think about it this way: it's right now your driver is really the only safety system on your truck. So they're responsible for monitoring every zone around that environment while simultaneously managing stops, waiting for traffic, watching for kids, operating the arm. I mean, it's a lot of inputs they're managing over the course of an 8-hour day. But in having a 360-degree awareness that kind of works with the driver, that technology exists today. It can notify a driver, tell them where the problem is, maybe what the problem is. Cameras add on, take off that cognitive workload today that strains drivers day in, day out. That's why some of these injuries, these accidents happen. So it's a fundamentally different approach than just sticking a camera in the cab and hoping someone watches that footage later. So the value of the system has to be in the moment, not something after the fact. So yeah.
Angelina, can I add something to that?
Sure.
Yeah, Davis, I agree with you that we need to be able to see around the truck 360 degrees, but my understanding is that the newest versions of the in-cab cameras are have the ability to alert the driver if he shows signs of drowsiness, if his head starts to slump, if his driving becomes erratic, and some of those systems are being used at several of my clients with very strong success. So I just want to make sure that we provide that information to attendees as well.
Yeah, spot on.
Are there any organizations that you've worked with, Davis, that have had cameras for years, but their incident rates haven't really changed? What advice can you give to an organization? Are they missing something?
Yeah, I mean that's possible. So I guess the hard thing is a lot of times cameras themselves, like I said, don't fix this problem. So if you installed cameras 5 years ago and the rates are flat, it's probably not because the cameras are bad. It's because the system around the cameras probably don't help close that loop. So it goes back to a camera that records as a documentation tool. It's great for liability. It's great for exoneration after an incident, but the value is back in the moment. So it's not intervention for that moment happening. So to David's point is that the driver's falling asleep at the wheel. Is he texting and driving? That's in the cab. And then outside of the cab, behind the truck, little Jimmy runs up while the arm's operating. It's the operating environment moments that are so key. So having cameras is great, but it goes back to their documentation tool. They don't help the driver in the moment, and you have to have that in the moment capability.
All right. Okay. Um, so David, in your opinion, what steps can organizations take to minimize safety risks and prevent more incidents altogether?
Boy, I wish there was. Do we have another hour to talk about that, right? If it was easy, we would be doing it and we wouldn't be the fifth most dangerous job in the country. I think we have to start with basics, right? We have to tell our drivers to wear their safety belt. We have to tell the drivers to stay off the cell phone. We have to tell the drivers to back carefully. Somebody had a slide that mentioned that 25% of all collisions involve backing, and that's accurate. And then we have to make sure that we educate both employers and employees about the benefits of making safety not a program that a safety director is responsible for, but a core value. Something like oxygen. You can't breathe without having it there. Because when safety is valued ahead of productivity, it changes the way things are done. And so that's going to take time. But in the meantime, there's the combination of the technologies that are out there, which both Adam and Davis have mentioned, as well as the basic blocking and tackling kinds of things that I've been describing, is I think at the end of the day, how we reduce accidents, injuries, and claims and get the industry off the top 10 list.
Right, right. John, the gloves that you mentioned, equipment, personal equipment such as that, it's very important as well. The gloves that you mentioned that you changed to,
Right.
how long is it before you would have to replace them? Do they last? I'm sure they last a lot longer than what you were using before. What's the
Yeah.
average
They,
use
they
time?
tend to last a month or more. So they have good long life to them. They hold up really well.
Okay, great, great. And you've seen a lot less uh, finger, hand injuries since
Yeah,
implementation.
we haven't had any since we made this change.
Wow, wow. Okay. So Adam, as far as the partnering with the fire department and other organizations to implement the cameras to kind of get the fire incidents under control, how important is that for your organization to partner with them?
Anytime you can partner with the first responders, I mean, anything to make their jobs easier, especially from a municipality standpoint. We got them involved early on. We wanted to know, okay, if there's a fire situation, what's the best thing to do? And their solution was, well, if we can get the material away from the truck, that helps protect us. And for lack of a better term, when you talk to firemen, what they want to do is they want to get in there and fight the fire. So the first thing instinct is to get close to the truck to get in there to fight the fire. And again, what's the best method in a situation for a garbage truck? Get the material away from the truck, get the assets away, give them an area where they can fight the fire in a safe situation. One of the photos that I shared, we're in Arizona and it was 115 degrees out, and you multiply that with the fire and then all the equipment that they're wearing and trying to fight it on top of a truck that's heating up itself with a fire inside of it was creating a huge issue. And again, we worked with them to say, hey, what's the best method to address this? And again, it's like quick notification for the driver to get to a location that's safe away from homes if possible, and then get the material out of the truck as quick as possible. So that was our goal, and that's what we achieved with this system that we're using.
Okay, great. Um, and you're still, obviously the lithium ion batteries and batteries are still the number one cause for fires. Have you seen anything else that would cause the fire incidents as well, or does it primarily remain only those items?
So recently, I say recently, Arizona, last few years, they legalized fireworks. So um, I love it. So, but then on the flip side of it, you have to deal with it once it's gone. And a lot of people don't know what the proper way to dispose of those, and they'll just throw them in the garbage cans. We do curbside collection here. They end up in the container. They reignite while they're in there, and it causes a fire later on in the truck. I can't. Every New Year's, the day after New Year's Eve, and after the Fourth of July, we're out there, yeah, dealing with fires. So.
Wow. Okay. For both Adam and John, a question. Is anyone allowing drivers to talk on hands-free cell phones in your organizations?
Absolutely not for us. In fact, our city just passed a bill that you can't use phones at all. Um, we do in some cases. We instruct our drivers to pull over to the side as soon as possible to return calls back. We are using telematics in our vehicles, and it'll notify the driver if they pick the phone up if that they need to put the phone down. So that's
Okay,
worked out real well for us.
great. John, how about Lek?
We allow them to use hands-free, but there's certain times they should not be on the phone when they got a container that's airborne, like front load or roll off, or when they're backing a truck, they're not to be on the phone at all.
Okay, okay. And now this is a question for all of you guys. Um, if you could give the best advice to all of the attendees out there as far as best safety tips that you can give them to avoid maybe collisions or driver fatigue or any incidents overall, what would it be? Would like to start.
I will. I don't mind. So for us, we involve our drivers with all our safety meetings. We get involvement from the boots on the ground level up. So if our drivers are seeing things that are out there that are hazard or emergency or could cause a problem like that, we listen to them. We address that. We incorporate it into our standard operating procedures. So if there's an area where we're servicing the city that could put the drivers at risk, like a backing situation or something like that, how do we fix that? We work real hard on using administrative guidelines and engineer guidelines to engineer those problems out of the situation to the point where we'll even reach out to, in that case, like a resident. Hey, instead of being able to put your cans here, we're going to ask you to move them over here, and here's why.
Mhm.
And in those situations. But again, I think for success, you need to have involvement from your staff. Have them involved in the whole process all the way out to rollout, and then review those on a regular basis. Have it. It's a living document, right? Things change constantly in our industry, and I think it's very important to have them involved early on.
Yes, definitely.
Adam, that's a great thing you just mentioned because if you look at the sort of the six standard points of a comprehensive safety program. The second one is employee participation. Make sure your employees are involved. The first one is management leadership. And so I'm going to emphasize that one. Management has to actually be willing to not just walk the walk, but talk the talk. They need to be committed to safety. They need to be communicating the fact that safety matters than more than productivity, and that they're willing to not keep customers that force a driver to back onto an interstate or onto a busy highway, during rush hour. And I know companies that have done that, that have given up that work because they didn't want to put their worker in that position. There's a number of ways for changing the safety culture, and yes, having employees participate is a critical part of it. For my money, having your leadership be involved and active and visible will pay many, many dividends and have huge ROI down the line.
Yeah.
Agreed. And building on what David was saying there, it goes back to for leadership to be invested. As you're trying to pitch whatever safety solution it is, it's what's the cost of doing nothing. I think we said that in the chat. Like, what is the cost of doing nothing in a safety situation? It can actually be a lot of money to do nothing in a detrimental way. So there's a lot of companies in the industry who are willing to partner with you, team up, help you with solutions, give you pilots. Be curious and try solutions that are out there, because all it takes is one for your company to find, and then your incident rate drops 30%, and then that cost drops significantly.
Yes. Yes.
Jump in here now. Foster an environment as a management team of trust with your employees, because if they don't feel comfortable speaking up about a problem, they're not going to. And then it's all on how you handle it after that. If you fail to handle it and resolve it, then you're going to lose your trust with your people.
Yep, I agree. How about you, Brandon?
I had to boil it down on one thing. I'd probably say uncertainty is going to be the biggest risk in hazardous materials transportation. So the more hauler knows ahead of time about the material and packaging and the hazards that are associated with it, the safer the whole process becomes. And a lot of that falls back on training, on making sure your drivers are trained and know, the processes. So
Okay. Well, great. I appreciate you all taking the time to participate and share your valuable knowledge on the safety issues, real world example, hands-on examples. Everything was perfect. Great information. Uh, we're going to wrap up for today. We're going to thank our sponsors, Platinum sponsors, Third Eye and Seek Thermal, for making all of this possible, including our silver sponsors, Route Smart, Swana, and Waste and Recycling Workers Week. You can keep up to date on the latest news and events every day by subscribing to Waste Advantage newsletter and visiting our website at wasteadvantage.com. Covering safety issues is important to us, and I hope everybody's taken something away from this webinar. I know I have. Our post-collection safety webinar will be held on September 10th at 2 o'clock, so keep an eye out for more details to come. The link to this collection safety webinar will be available by the end of the week, and the webinar will be shared on our site by next week. So in the meantime, feel free to reach out with any questions, and we appreciate everybody for being a part of this event. Thank you so much. Have a great afternoon.
Thanks, Angelina.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.